All right, welcome to the fourth and final game of the evening. Up this time is Llamasoft, the Jeff Mincher story. Right, bit of a warning, this may be a long one. Anyway, so to get into this, I will first pose a query to my cohorts here. Do you know who Jeff Minter is?
That I do not.
Doesn't ring a bell, but I'm terrible at remembering that kind of thing anyway.
Fair enough. Um, my own personal experience is I've known the name Jeff Minter for a few decades now, but I'm not terrible. Until this package, I was not terribly familiar with his overall oeuvre. Um, and that's not a surprise because Jeff Minter has been making games for 45 years, give or take. According to this interactive documentary, he started by coding on the Commodore PET in 1979 in a computer lab when he was like a teenager or something like that. Very young. And a few years later, he got into the commercial scene. But we're talking the commercial scene of the UK computer scene. And that's largely where he stayed for the 80s up to the early 90s. And he really didn't break out of that particular bubble until the mid-90s. And where I first heard his name was in conjunction with a little game called Tempest 2000, which may have a bit more notoriety overall. Though if you don't know the story on Tempest 2000, it was a reworking of the classic tube shooter Tempest. One of the earliest, maybe the earliest Golden Age remake of the 90s. No,
I am aware of it mostly by reputation rather than experience or anything.
Well, once again, that was mostly my story as well. I remember Tempest 2000 being hyped up in the gaming magazines of the age, but I never played it because it came out in the goddamn Atari Jaguar. And statistically speaking, that makes me normal. Because most people did not buy an Atari Jaguar. But at the very least, it raised his profile in a way that none of his other releases did. And it's not the first game from Jeff Minter to ever reach our shores either. Hang on here. According to the documentary, the first game to reach U.S. shelves was Grid Runner, one of the signature game franchises by Jeff Minter. It is a play off of Alien and Centipede and Tron, really. And Grid Runner was released over here bizarrely under the name Attack of the Mutant Camels. Not so much the name being bizarre, because that was the name of another Jeff Minter project that was completely unrelated to Grid Runner, except possibly in story. I did notice a lot of reused elements there, but I don't think it was anything that was remotely taken seriously. because we are talking about the mid '80s. Score attack shooters. The plot lines were not extensive if they existed at all. We've talked about this before. Anyway, point is, the first time I ever heard of Jeff Minter was in conjunction with Tempest 2000, and a little bit later with Defender 2000. And then, he just kind of disappeared off the grid, if you will, until my first actual experience with playing one of his games was with the late 2000s Tempest. Alike. His definitely not Tempest, but still legally distinct tube shooter called Space Giraffe. Which was first released on the Xbox Live Arcade in 2008, and released on the PC, Steam in like 2009. And the thing is, having played Tempest 2000, I think Space Giraffe is actually the better game. It's definitely not the more well-known game, but that's what happens when you have a decade plus of development experience and better technology to work with. But that's neither here nor there. This is about the package as it is displayed here. And Llamasoft, the Jeff Minter story, is all about celebrating the early mid stage of Jeff Minter's career. Or at least that's where the rights go up to. Because Jeff Minter, it's posed that he's, maybe the last indie developer, which is a weird way of phrasing it. It's more like he's the first, or one of the first. Because once again, he started making games. Granted, they weren't commercial yet, but he was still, he was coding in 1979. We're talking the dawn of the British computer industry. So he's been in it for a long time. And that's a reflection in this collection. Because you get 42 games, and they're, the latest title is Tempest 2000. That isn't Grid Runner Remastered, is Tempest 2000, which came out in 1994. And really, the bulk of the collection is about his releases in the 80s, because you will note that on the surface, it seems like he was just a games machine with the amount of stuff he was releasing. Never mind a year, just like in a couple of months. He was putting out either a new original title, or he was putting out a port of one of his games. And, that's that's just one of the things that separates the then from the now. Just overall, games were a lot simpler. It's a story that comes up on our program all the time. Even the indie games take a lot of time in general to make. Arguably too much time. But once again, a single game taking 2 to 3 years is not unusual. Here, that kind of development cycle, unheard of, or pretty much unheard of. And even if, you'd probably be working on another game or two in order to just release. So that's the overall generalities. You might be asking, so what's in this package? I mean, I could go over all 42 games, some more than others. But that might just verge on sheer tedium for me and for you. Like, because once again, there's a lot here, but it's got pretty much his signature series of game, the aforementioned Grid Runner, for example, and its sequels, Matrix, Grid Runner 2, and Void Runner, which was a very interesting release in its own right, because Void Runner is probably one of the first instances of the demake. I know that's weird to state, but Void Runner was a game that came out in like, I want to say like 1986, 1987, and it was for the Commodore 16, which was like the budget dumbed down version of the Commodore 64 or something like that. So it applied the same principles of a demake to that. What do I have to do to get this to get my game running on this particular platform? And also throwing in some new ideas. Like Void Runner, instead of a single ship, you have 4 ships, which makes it admittedly more unpleasant to play. I think we addressed this just last week. Yeah, with Tiger Heli. It's like having a bunch of ships makes you a bigger target. Yeah. And like I said, there's so much to go over here. But in general, Jeff Minter's games from this era are score attack games of a various sort that are probably in space. He's probably riffing on one of his favorite titles, Defender, Centipede, The Empire Strikes Back. That's the inspiration for Attack of the Mutant Camels. Revenge of the Mutant Camels is the twisty sequel to that. And I will give him credit. There weren't many. There were Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600 should have commanded more influence than it actually did. Because if you don't know, the Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600, the very first Star Wars game ever. And of course...
it probably had a goddamn snowspeeder tripping the AT-ATs level, didn't it?
You're almost right. I'm like, it had a snowspeeder, it had AT-ATs, you did not trip them up. The Atari 2600 was just not capable of that feat. So
you just shoot them normally. Yep.
And that played out as if, well, you were shooting an AT-AT with a snowspeeder. They took a lot of shots to damage and to kill. And in fact, that's kind of the central premise. The AT-ATs are walking to Echo Base, and your job as Luke Skywalker in the snowspeeder is to shoot them into destruction. And the game is lost if they overrun Echo Base. And the entire premise is lifted into Attack of the Mutant Camels. That's the thing. One of the central quirks of Jeff Minter. It's in some of the names: Llamasoft, Attack of the Mutant Camels. For whatever reason, I don't think it's been fully expounded upon in his notations and newsletters and all that. But he has had a fixation on not so much farm animals, but beasts of burden. The llama, the camel, the ox, the sheep. Some of those are farm animals, some of them are not. The yak. The commonality is they're all what we call beasts of burden. Not necessarily working on a farm, but they are all animals that pack animals of a certain type that we have domesticated for, burdensome tasks. And they are a fixture, not just in terms of the names, but in terms of like enemies, secret icons, just overall aesthetics. You can tell you're playing a Jeff Minter game if you've got like a sheep or an ox or many sheeps or something of that nature in your video game. It's one of the central quirks. Another is psychedelia, for lack of a better term. Or I suppose there are better terms here, but I cannot 100% confirm that a lot of drugs were used in conjunction with these games. I'm just fairly certain of it. Just because the scene that is attached to psychedelia, kind of renowned for its drug, especially its drug of choice, LSD. I'm not inferring any actual drug use here on the part of the developers. More, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the audience got tripped up with some of the projects here, especially two of the included quote-unquote games. They're less games and more software applications, and pretty important ones. Because one of them is indeed called Psychedelia. And the other one is Color Space. And Jeff Minter has a whole bunch of these visualizers. Now, granted, it was a lot more primitive on, say, the Commodore 64 and the Atari ST. Or, Color Space was for the Atari 8-bits. It's the absent Tryptotron that was for the Atari ST. But, yes, he was on the forefront of visualizer development. Including the later virtual light machine that was standard in the Atari Jaguar CD, and then there's the visualizer you probably actually used that was designed by Jeff Minter. He did the virtual light machine version 2 for the Xbox 360. And that comes standard in the firmware of that system. So
that's neat.
Yeah. And, just general, the visualizers worked better once CDs were a thing, because, you could just plug a CD into even the Jaguar CD and, have the visualizer going on with the music relatively easily, as opposed to, putting on Psychedelia for your Commodore 64. I mean, it's the same basic concept, but there's a lot more manual control here. It's
Mhm.
not just you play the music and then the visualizer goes.
I kind of wish my 360 disk drive wasn't borked, because I'd kind of show that off.
Right. Like, anyway, point is, like, I think just statistically speaking, the Virtual Light Machine 2.0 is probably the product that the most people have experienced. And they don't even know who created it. At least most people. Once again, Jeff Minter has always commanded an audience, even back in the 8-bit days. In fact, this is one of the overarching narratives that's to be found in the development notes in the various newsletters and the stuff that gets passed along, especially when we get to the late 80s and early 90s. Jeff Minter is, let's say, very vocal about the state of the industry and where it is going, and his disappointments and frustrations about that. And on the one hand, I understand the frustrations because here's the thing. Like, a lot of what we're talking about in the here and now in terms of the video game industry, guess what? Time is a fucking flat circle, because a lot of the complaints that you find now can be applied to what was going on in the late 80s and early 90s, especially in the British computer scene. I'm like, not everything is a direct analog by any means, but to give you the base version of what was being talked about here, because some of it is very specific to the British computer scene. We might have touched upon it in some other classic reviews, probably from Pixel Games UK. But okay, so something that's very specific to the British computer scene was the pricing of cassette tapes. Yes, I think we have mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. So the thing about the cassette tapes of the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum and the Atari 8-bits, they were the most price-friendly entry points into the video gaming scene. Because,
I mean, I guess technically typing it yourself was more, cheaper, but, you also had to type it out yourself.
right, but just overall,
It's
the average.
cheaper, except unless you consider time to be money.
Mm.
Well, I mean, that was kind of that was kind of the trade-off with cassettes versus cartridges. Cartridges were a lot cheaper, a lot more expensive, but they were just so much faster. And once again, that kind of sounds like the argument between, CD-ROMs and cartridges that we were having in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. The cassette tapes weren't that much better or worse than cartridges overall. They're about the same in terms of what you could hold space-wise.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the reason why CD-ROMs won so handily in that debate was it's just you got so much space for so little money overall. That unless you were Nintendo, of course you went with the CDs.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be mad not to.
Again, looks at Nintendo.
Yeah. But once again, that's not the debate we're having here. No. cassette tapes were very in vogue. Much more in vogue over in Britain, the UK, than over here in America. In fact, it's noted in one of, I think, the newsletters or one of the correspondence bits noted that cartridge games are much more popular overseas, read America, than cassettes are. I mean, cassette games were a thing for like the Commodore 64 and other platforms, but yeah, they weren't as popular as cartridges, or the real thing that comes to mind, floppy disks over here. Anyway, getting back to specifically cassettes in the UK, they cost about £4 to £8 on average, which, you know, calculating for inflation and exchange rates, probably equates to about $16 to $20. I'm just spitballing here because I don't have. Yeah, the point is, yeah, they're mega affordable compared to like the 30 to 40 quid, I believe, that the cartridge games were going for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, once again, the price differentials were a no-brainer, especially given how big the pool was for that format. No matter which computer you owned, you were probably buying into the cassettes. In fact, there is an entire documentary about this, a book and a movie called From Bedrooms to Billions, that was built off of this particular empire. Like, that goes into much more detail, and I would consider it recommended reading or watching if you're into this kind of scene here. But by the late 80s, that market was cooling off. They never had a crash like we did, but very much some of the bedroom programmers got bigger, some of them got more corporate, and that's one of the things that Jeff Minter's railing on in the late 80s. He's complaining about the corporatization of video gaming. Once again, that's a complaint that just seems to keep coming up time and again. That, these bigger firms are releasing all this product, but, there's no artistry in it. I'm like, and it's causing, and it was causing his business to suffer. So this might be getting to a controversial stance that I possess here. Yeah, I'm getting to the point here. Because this is something I specifically wanted to refute to Jeff Minter here. Maybe we'll get to the chance in an interview. But, okay, here's the thing. He's complaining about the games and where they're going. But the thing that Jeff Minter is releasing in 1989, what especially his 1991 set, Llamatron 2112 and Super Grid Runner. Okay, he's releasing a riff off of Robotron 2084 and another version of Grid Runner, which is based off of Centipede. And the year is 1991. Do you see where I'm going with this? And if you don't, I'll clue you in. He's still making games off of the golden age of arcade-style games.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 1991.
Mm. Notably, after the golden age of arcade-type games.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with the games themselves. They're still super quirky. But I could not get around this fact. He also backed some of the wrong horses. He backed the Konex Super System, which is actually being one of the games being touted in this is Attack of the Mutant Cannibals '89, which is the first time we've seen this unreleased demo for the Konex Super System, which is supposed to be the first British console ever, and it just didn't materialize. Like I said, there's just so much to go through here. I warned you it was going to be a long one. Anyway, my point is he's still releasing games off of the golden age of arcade. And it's actually a regression of what he was doing just a few years earlier. Because just like in the mid-'80s, he's releasing stuff like Battleaxe, like Battleaxe, Battlyx, which is this insane combination of 6 mini games that you can switch out, and it's really complicated stuff. Or Ankipital. I have no idea if I'm... Or Ankipital. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's spelled Ancipital.
Incipital, probably, yeah.
Incipital? Like, there we go. I just keep mentally changing to Ancapital. Yeah, Anti-Capital or whatever. And this is probably the most interesting game here. Because, honestly, if I have an overall critique of Jeff Minter and this collection is, there's no way around it. There's just a lot of score attack shooting. It's a wide range, but it's like there's a lot of horizontal defender alikes here. And it all just kind of blends together no matter how many fancy colors and camels or sheep or llamas you throw into the mix.
Mm-hmm. And there's stuff you could do to make score attack shooters interesting, which a lot of people have done with music and rhythm and stuff. But
and once again, like, and Jeff Minter does that in this collection with his game. Mm-hmm. And in this collection, you're gonna get
there's only so far you can take it.
Oh yeah, there's only so far, and once again, there's just so many of them. Not just in time, in terms of games, but you get multiple versions of a game here. But once again, he did a lot of other stuff, and that's why I'm highlighting Anticipal here. Because it's a riff on something he never touched on again. It's his entry into the 2D platforming genre. And it is playing off of not an arcade game, but one of Ultimate Play the Game /Rareware /Rare early isometric adventure games. Like I said, it's a standout on that alone because it's the only time he did a game like this. And it is, okay, I unfortunately did not have enough time to really pick into this one because, and this is another thing I wanted to eventually get to, what is new in this particular collection. Because if you played Atari 50, if you played the first Gold Master game, which we've reviewed, the making of Karateka, you know the overall format of the games, how they're emulated, and all that. It's in line with that. The big thing that's brought into this is the ranking system. And it's ranked on a scale of complexity. Like some of the early stuff is ranked from 1 to 2 llamas. Once again, that's just the central quirk of Jeff Minter. And then a lot of the later stuff, like the aforementioned Battleaxe and Anticipal, they're rated to like 4 to 5 llamas. They're incredibly complicated games for their genres. with a huge learning curve. And that's the thing that's the other thing that really struck out to me about what he was putting out at the tail end of, say, the Commodore 64 and the Atari 8-bits, and what he was doing on the Atari ST, minus Triptotron. It's one of the glaring omissions here, because that is the third and final form of the virtualizers that he was doing of the age. Next one out is the Virtual Light Machine, and that's a bit different. And I don't think I've seen anyone ask why Triptotron isn't here. The game that has definitely been asked that has been missing, the two games are Tempest 3000, and I'll address that here. Tempest 3000 was one of the few games made for the fucking Nuon. Which is totally fitting into Jeff Minter's life choices and systems that he picks. Of course he would pick one of the most obscure formats to have ever been invented. It has 8 games. And the reason why Tempest 3000 isn't here is apparently it wasn't in the budget. I don't know how expensive that thing would be to crack and make, but it would take a lot of dosh. But I got a notification about this a few days ago. But apparently a lot of people have been asking where Defender 2000 is. And I can answer that question. I knew this because Defender 2000, Defender 2 for the Atari ST, which Jeff Minter, he did the port work on that. The original Defender. Defender, the IP is owned by Warner Brothers because that was that IP was owned by Williams, which got bought out by Midway, which got eventually bought out by Warner Brothers.
And of course, in their financial situation, they're not willing to sell it. They need to delete it for a tax break instead.
I mean, in fairness, Warner Brothers is just not doing anything with Defender, which might be the better option. It's in fact, I don't know if Discovery even knows that they own most of the Midway stuff. It would not surprise me. I'm maybe it's just better dead in the void is better than being locked in the tax hole. I'm ugh. Anyway, my point is, those are why those games aren't here. And as to why a lot of, why are Jeff Minter's more recent works are not here, well, they're still commercially available. If you want to play Space Giraffe, you can buy it on Steam, etc., etc., etc. They're not unavailable, it's just not in this package. You're just going to have to, even Jeff Minter isn't immune to the ravages of commercialism, let's say. Anyway, getting back to my grand point. So why is Triptotron here? I think it's because, and I think this came up in one of or several of our interviews with Digital Eclipse last year. It's because they haven't quite cracked the secrets of Atari ST programming. Now, it might be noted, but they got Atari ST games here. They don't. This is something I haven't really seen. Maybe some other reviewer has brought this up. But Super Grid Runner for the Atari ST and Llamasoft 2112 for the Atari ST, they're not actually for the Atari ST. If you actually load them up, they're for the Atari Jaguar. They're actually Atari Jaguar versions of the Atari ST games.
Interesting.
So, yeah, they're cheating because they got the Atari Jaguar emulator. Remember, Digital Eclipse very proudly touted that they cracked the code and gave the world the best Atari Jaguar emulator the world has ever seen. And they're using that here, not just for Tempest 2000, but Super Grid Runner and Llamatron. So that tells me, if we get them back on the show, I'll ask them directly. But just from the evidence presented here, that they haven't quite cracked the Atari ST emulation yet. Also worth noting, the Commodore Amiga is completely missing here as well.
I mean,
that's
granted,
probably.
I'm pretty sure the ST was put together with fucking rubber bands and hope. Looking at some of the shit behind that.
I'm like, I've heard the opposite. Like, the Atari ST is a very capable machine. Underrated.
Capable, yes. It's just the code base it sits upon is fucking. Oh no.
I mean, fair enough. It is Jack Tramiel. Like, but be that as anyway, getting back to what I was talking about here, the Commodore Amiga is completely absent. And yeah, Jeff Minter did quite a bit of work on that platform as well. It's just completely not represented here at all. Which once again indicates to me that they have not cracked that platform. Once again, it's something we can ask.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Like I said, there's just so much I could cover that I haven't. This is just what happens when you pack 42, technically 43 games, because I believe Grid Runner Remastered is counting as game number 43, even though Jeff Minter didn't directly create that. That's another one done by the head of Digital Eclipse, Mike Mika. We touched upon that in our interview with Chris Kohler about the making of Karateka. Like I said, just any which way I can point to. God, I'm trying to remember it went under a couple of names. City Bomb, which was originally released as a parody game, in conjunction with the Falkland Islands War, where you actually bombed Buenos Aires, and then Jeff Minter was surprised he got a lot of backlash for it. Yeah, like I said, this game this package just contains so much stuff, so much history, so much quirky anecdotes that, yes, it's missing a thing here or there. And it would, would the package be overall better if it had Defender 2000 or Tripitron or the Amiga version of whatever version of Grid Runner they got? Sure, of course. But, I think a few people are just focusing too much on what isn't here. And I think another problem is just overall, there's not a lot of cachet. If you're not aware of who Jeff Minter is.
I noticed that the preview footage for it has documentary footage. Is that included, or is that just?
Oh yeah. Oh, see, I haven't even talked about the documentary footage because that's actually important. Look, this is why I spent 13. If you will. Well, here's the thing. This footage is actually a preview of a full-blown documentary called "The Heart of Neon" that is coming this year. We saw something like this in the making of Karateka, but that was actually the thing that was coming soon from that perspective was Jordan Mechner's memoir book. This is a full-on video documentary that was done in conjunction with, I forget the production company that's doing The Heart of Neon. Now, what's lacking in comparison to the making of Karateka are a few things, actually. And that is the ability to self-play. I did not see that option here, but that actually makes sense. Because if you remember going back to the making of Karateka, that is that was a adventure style, almost proto fighter thing.
Yeah, it's very scripted that you could easily do a self-play thing.
Yeah,
unlike
we've also
a
seen
lot of score attack stuff, which really
Yeah.
isn't that well.
Yeah, having an autoplay with all this score attack stuff wouldn't really work. And once again, that's not every game here, but I could also see why they didn't include autoplay in like 3D. Okay, 3D is a reference to the fact that this is Jeff Minter's Maze Explorer game, and you're actually exploring a cube. Like there's you're going up and down, and not just like there's like 3 levels of 3D here. That's what it's indicating. It makes more sense if you see it. But I can see why that didn't have an autoplay either, because just playing is the entire point. Anyway, autoplay has been a fixture of Digital Eclipse's releases for a long time now. Like you can find it in the Disney Classics collection. Anyway, other things, commentary tracks that we found in the making of Karateka. Once again, that fit the style of game that was in the making of Karateka. Like, I don't see how you could really do commentary in any game here. They're just, even the more interesting stuff is based for like kind of short bursts of gameplay. That was actually the biggest point I think I forgot to mention in was talking about earlier. Another reason why Jeff Minter kind of drifted off to obscurity is because games were getting longer in the late 80s and early 90s. Even in the arcades, we were getting games like Narc and Smash TV and so on and so forth. Versus, once again, he was still riffing on Robotron 2084. Yeah, it's no wonder that, he kind of sunk to more obscure levels than he was previously. Thankfully he did find a thing of the time, and that's shareware. Like I said, there's a lot of history. Like this is a lot. Anyway, finally, getting back to the documentary footage. There's a lot more modern footage here. There is a lot less classic footage. I'm not going to say there's not nothing here, but compared to the making of Karateka, that had a lot more. Jordan Mechner had a lot of home movie stuff that chronicled the making of Karateka. Jeff Minter had a lot less of the time materials that were video.
Well, and also Jeff's still a little more of a public figure now.
Right, but Jordan Mechner's also still working in the industry. He's still got a supervisorial capacity on the Prince of Persia franchise.
Oh, he is? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he owns that franchise.
I keep forgetting that is his franchise.
Yeah, I mean, Ubisoft is still leasing that out. So, anyway. So that's kind of what's missing there in comparison. I can't compare it to Atari 50 because I haven't actually taken the plunge on that. Because that's even bigger and is $40. Like, anyway, which is a good segue into pricing. Because this game commands its own fairly hefty price. And I predicted it was going to be the price, and indeed it is the price. It's clocking in at $30, $29.99. Which is exactly the price I would have put this out for, if I were in charge of such decisions. Because it's not as big as Atari 50, and it doesn't command the licensing fees that the Cowabunga collection has.
Right.
The TMNT collection has less games, but they just made less Turtle games because of various things. But also that's a license thing, and you have to take that into account. $30 is exactly the price this should come in at, because you are getting a shit ton of games. Will it come down in price? Probably, like in a few years, maybe a year from now, it'll be $20, what have you.
It might be down. Might start coming down in the winter sale. I doubt it will in the summer sale because it just dropped. This week.
Oh yeah. It's not even got a discount.
Yeah.
On Steam. That's how serious they are about it. Like I said, and you are just getting so much history. Like I said, as far as the actual emulation goes, once again, I am about the furthest person, I think we all are, from judging the emulation quality of this particular package.
Specifically of the systems on hand. Like, if it was a Genesis emulation or a SNES emulation, we could probably judge that fairly well, but... like, none of us here have ever used a ZX Spectrum or a fucking Jaguar. The closest we could have feasibly come to the systems were like the Atari 8-bits. I'm like, and admittedly, like my middle high school had an Atari 400 for some reason, but not surprisingly, no Jeff Minter games. I do remember playing a lot of Dig Dug on that machine. So. Good times. It's a cartridge version as well, so no fucking load times. Right.
Like, or the Commodore 64. And as far as I know, no one here grew up with a Commodore 64, knew anyone who had a Commodore 64. My house was IBM PC compatibles. So, once again, like, somebody who is much more familiar with the systems on hand will have to do the emulation comparison, but they seem to be reasonably well, which is a blessing and a curse. Because, like, the overall playability of a lot of the, especially the ZX Spectrum games, isn't great.
Because they're emulating a Spectrum.
Yeah, I'm like, you're not getting around the fact that it's fucking janky. I'm like, yeah, that's another thing. As the timeline goes on, the more playable the games get overall. Now, granted, some modern accoutrements are being used. Once again, like Llamatron 2112, they are cheating extra hard on that because they actually implemented twin stick controls with that game. So, of course, that game plays like a dream. It's using the proper control setup that you would not have gotten in 1991 on the Atari ST.
Unless, Did at least control, like, if you plugged in two controllers, could it accept that, or is this just...
I have no idea.
Fair.
I honestly have no idea.
Because I know that was a trick of the era.
That was a trick of like the Nintendo 64 with its version of Robotron.
Some
do you remember that?
Some micros also did that.
Right. But that's not. That's not exactly a control scheme you necessarily would have had.
Oh God, no! Especially when controllers were like almost $50-$60 a pop.
Yeah, but that's a more overt bringing a game to modern standards. Like, so yeah, of course, Llamatron 2112 plays probably the best it's ever played, because not only is it not using a joystick for the Atari ST, it's not using a goddamn Atari Jaguar pad.
I think that actually constitutes a war crime if you make someone try and hold that monstrosity for more than 2 hours. It depends on the game.
Valid.
But playing Llamatron, which once again, that is a very close riff on Robotron. Like it's even got the entrance bits that Robotron had. So having that play well is very good. And once again, it's one of the best games in the collection overall. I just found it, unfortunately, less creative than what he was doing a few years ago. Once again, it's a perfectly fine game. Not coming down on it for anything like that. Just, I have to examine it in the year of 1991. And I'm just going to say that Jeff Minter was lucky that he had a fan base that was willing to shell out £5 for his game sight unseen. No, sorry. They downloaded it and they thanked him with $5 or £5. That was the beginning. That was his shareware model, which is a specific kind of shareware.
We could probably almost make a topic on that if we really needed to.
Well, I'd have to go look some videos up, but I don't feel like doing that.
Yeah, it'd be one of those if we were real desperate for a topic.
Yeah. Anyway, and of course, Tempest 2000 plays very well. Having finally played it, I can see why it was so highly praised. The issue, if you will, on that particular title is it's a repeat. Tempest 2000 did appear in Atari 50. Once again, it makes sense why it's in the Jeff Minter story, because Jeff Minter made the damn thing.
Yeah.
But you can't get around the fact that we've seen this title before.
Yeah.
And it was quite the headlining title in Atari 50, because that was the first time this legendary, arguably the best Atari Jaguar game ever made, finally got out into the wider world. I'm like, and here it's the exact same thing. Maybe the emulation's a bit better since it's using a later version of the Atari Jaguar emulator. I don't know, but that's kind of minor detailing. Like, if they hadn't done that thing for Atari 50, they would have done it here. They would have plastered Tempest 2000 all over the place. It would have been the headlining game. As it is, the headlining games are arguably Attack of the Mutant Camels 89 for the Conex and Grid Runner Remastered. Sorry, this has been going on for a good amount of time, and I'm getting a bit verklempt. Anyway, so yeah, overall, it's one of the best retro things I've ever covered, I've ever reviewed. I like it much more than the making of Karateka.
Is the documentary, it features almost like full feature enough it could go on like Netflix, or is it still something that you still need the stuff from the actual game stuff for it to have context?
I'm like, yes.
Right.
Because the documentary bits are about 5 minutes long each.
Fair, because I know that there are sometimes you get that where it's a full feature documentary, they could just go post on Netflix, and some of it's just bits and pieces.
Yeah, I'm like, no, that's the full-blown Hearts of Neon documentary. I don't know if it's coming to Netflix. I don't know the platforms, what that thing is, but, my focus wasn't on that. It was on this interactive documentary. I can't say it's the best package that Digital Eclipse has ever put out, because, once again, I haven't played the Cowabunga collection or the Atari 50 set. When they get, we were never given those games for review, so we didn't cover them.
Yeah, I think, didn't you mention the Cowabunga collection at least on your radar if you find it on Steam sale for a decent price?
Yeah. Or
I know you're a Turtles fan, at least.
Oh yeah, though I might end up picking that up sometime this year because licensed thing, it's already getting delisted in Japan for all platforms. So, warning bells are ringing here.
Yeah. Is there much licensed stuff in this that we'd have to worry about, or is it just all just own stuff?
And as far as the actual games, it's all the stuff that Jeff Minter probably personally owns or has the rights to.
So this shouldn't disappear in a few years.
So, yeah. Interestingly enough, once again, a new feature for this package is the complete gameography. It does have a list of every game that Jeff Minter has worked on to the present, if you will. The present being the release of Llamasoft, the Jeff Minter story. Which means I don't think it quite includes the VR version of AKR, however you pronounce that thing. But that means it does have Defender 2000 represented here in the form of not just the name, but it actually has a screenshot of it. So Digital Eclipse did actually do the legwork to clear all of the games, even the ones that they couldn't include in a proper video game for here. Which is, once again, that's kind of the extra step that Digital Eclipse does in comparison to other retro purveyors that we have featured on the show in terms of interviews or reviews.
And it's one of those that they just mention that they exist. You can't, take a link to, the Steam page or whatever where to get them. It just, hey, this is a thing Jeff also did.
No, there's no links to the Steam pages or eBay or what have you.
Yeah, obviously they wouldn't do eBay, but...
I'm and it's probably best that they didn't do that because...
Fair.
I'm not saying that Jeff, Space Giraffe or the Minotaur Collection or what, or Grid Runner Plus or what have you, whatever's on Steam disappear, but Tempest 4000 could vanish. Maybe. I don't know. That's not his. Anyway, overall, this is an amazing collection. The only caveats are what would be missing. If you're looking to get Defender 2000, you're still going to have to track down an Atari Jaguar version of that at this point in time. Maybe that'll be future DLC. I can't definitively state, but they did do DLC for Atari 50 recently. And I think the biggest warning might be now they don't have a epilepsy warning on the Steam page or anything like that, but I'm gonna go ahead and issue an epilepsy warning here because once again, Jeff Minter is into psychedelia, colors, flashing lights, 80s and 90s computer games. Bad time for epilepsy and epileptics. I don't know what steps have been taken to protect people who suffer from epilepsy. That is definitely a question I'm asking Chris or Steven or whomever we get from Digital Eclipse in the future. Because I don't want people to get seizures. A reviewer friend of mine is very epileptic, and this is the kind of thing that could very much trigger a seizure. So, big fat warning there. Okay. I think I'm done.
Do you feel better now?
A lot. Right. Look, that was downright tantric. It was one of those. And like I said, I could keep going.
I know you could, but we're going to have to bound and gag you here in the next 20 minutes if this keeps going longer.
I don't want it to go longer. I'm getting exhausted. All right, anyway, that'll do it for Llamasoft. Like, for now. Maybe we do an interview in the future.
For now, he says, good Lord. Send help.
I'm like I said, only if we do an interview about the game.
Fair.
Anyway, coming up on the week ahead, on March 20th, we'll be welcoming Keith of Mooncube Games. They are currently working on Spirit City Lo-Fi Sessions. Spirit City Lo-Fi Sessions is a gamified focus tool set to a soothing lo-fi soundtrack. Discover and collect spirits, customize your virtual space, and facilitate your real-life tasks with a collection of handy features designed to improve concentration and ease stress. Normally, I probably would have stuffed this over on MSP, but at the time, we didn't have any openings.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. And it's gamey enough for me to say, yeah, this can go for Fragments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's honestly one of those either-or things, depending on what's available at the time. Like, and also, I'll mention that off camera. Anyway, we do have a new episode of MSP planned. Anyway, MSP is pretty much settled into its new routine. Like, I don't see anything major changing with MSP in the foreseeable future, thank God.
For now, at least, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if something major happened to Mac again, we don't need him to run the show anymore.
Yeah.
Mike. Anyway, on Friday, March 22nd, yes, we do have a Friday show this week. Thankfully, my brother's family have settled into their new routine. And as I predicted, it's not interfering on show times.
Now, when the summer rolls around, we may need to reinvestigate things.
Yes.
Are we still online?
Yes.
We are.
Okay.
Right. Anyway, on Friday, March 22nd, we'll be having Rustam Amirzinov of Rubido Games. They are the developers of Soulbind, Tales of the Underworld. It's up to you to become the Endless, a mysterious skeleton, and embark on a perilous journey. Collect monster body parts to enhance your character and use a variety of abilities. Explore sinister locations, fight mythical creatures, and uncover the secrets of the underworld. Right. So that's coming up on the week. And until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.